Hello, everyone. I am Mira Dessy, and I am one of the Bauman mentors, and I am excited to also be your presenter today. I am really excited to be talking with you today. I will share that I myself am a Bowman graduate, and through the years as after graduation, I developed a nerdly fascination with the label and indeed became known as the ingredient guru. And so today we are going to take a quick spin through one of my favorite topics. What are some of the things that are lurking in your pantry, and what are some healthy swaps that we can make that will make a difference for our overall health and well-being? So today's talk is called What's Lurking in Your Pantry, Swapping Harmful for Healthful. Next. When it comes to how we nourish ourselves, it turns out that it's not just what you eat. It's also what's in what you eat, because the things that make up the foods that you eat also need to contribute to your overall nourishment of your body. And if you are eating things that are non-nourishing substances or that provide certain health issues, it is going to have a long-term and compounding effect. So learning how to read the label, learning how to understand what we're eating is very important. Next. So this is a screen of my top 10 ingredients to avoid. I'm not going to lie. Often when I talk, people go, so what should I avoid? And the answer is a lot. But if I had to pull it down to 10, these are the ones that I think are the most important. And we're going to take a moment to go through them one by one. And I'm going to talk briefly about each one of them. But before I do that, I also want to share this talk is not meant to be scary or overwhelming or bring you to a point where you're like, oh, I can't ever eat again. I don't know what I'm going to do. The goal is to simply become educated about what's in what you're eating. And I also want to encourage you to remember that this is not a race to the finish line. This is a journey. So I'm going to talk about these different things, and maybe something that I'm talking about is going to resonate for you, and you'll think, oh, I could totally work on getting rid of that in my diet. And as we master that, then we move on to the next thing. This is not where you are meant to get rid of everything all at once. One, it's very overwhelming to try to do that. And two, it can be really challenging because we need to learn what the changes are and find food options to replace them. And then we also want to make it sustainable. So we need to master this before we move on to the next one. How fast you go through it just depends on what's already in your pantry and what you're eating, but a little bit at a time. Every single change we make is positive and contributes to health and well-being. Next. So I am showing you a slide here, and all of the slides to follow this are scientific studies. I don't expect you to dive deep into the science with me here. This is just so that you can see that the things that I'm sharing about have been well researched, and there are studies that show that these things can have an impact on health and well-being. And the talk that I'm talking about is just giving you some examples of where to find things or why these are not good choices. My number one tends to be artificial colors, in part because they're so easy to avoid. In our country, we're very lucky. They have to use the name of the color and then the number of the chemical formulation for that color. In other countries, they use something called E numbers. So then you have to memorize a whole list of which are the good ones, which are the not good ones. And here we can look at them and be able to remove them from the diet. Unfortunately, artificial colors tend to be very, very challenging, especially for people who have attention-related disorders, and believe it or not, also for people who have anxiety. And then a side component of that in this particular study, they also found that sodium benzoate, which is a preservative that frequently can appear along with the artificial colors, also has an impact. And when we consume these artificial colors, it can increase inattentive behavior, it can increase anxiety. It generally is not good for our mental well-being as well as our physical well-being. Interestingly enough, I don't know if any of you have seen, there was recently news about the fact that red is going to be removed from the food supply. We've had different reds removed along the years, and now we're looking at red number 2 was removed. Now red number 40 is coming out. I believe this is the beginning of a cascade to remove artificial colors, which is actually a good thing because they are made from petrochemicals. And I promise you, there is no nutrition in gasoline for human bodies. And so removing these is definitely something that will be good. In the meantime, you do have to read the label. I also want to encourage people to remember it's not just food that can have artificial colors in them. A lot of oral care products like toothpastes and mouthwashes and those kinds of things can also have artificial colors in them. And because we have soft tissue in our mouth that absorbs things, we want to make sure that we're not putting in things that do not have nutritive value. Next. Another big one is artificial sweeteners. And if you haven't guessed by now, artificial anything is definitely on my list. We do not want to be doing these. One of the things that I will share about artificial sweeteners is that manufacturers continue to try to search for new artificial sweeteners as we discover health impacts from the ones that we already have. A number of them are linked to cancer. Many of them have been linked to obesity, heart disease, diabetes. And so they look for new ones because we have this human design that causes us to seek out sweets. And this is from millennia ago when we were, ranging the plains and perhaps trying to beat the bears and the other animals to berries and honey and other things. We are programmed to seek out sweet. Unfortunately, we are not designed to live in an age where sweet and sugar is everywhere. And so we have a tendency to overconsume. And then someone thought, well, what if it tasted sweet and you didn't have the caloric impact? The challenge with that is our brain actually has a little calculator and it goes, I got something sweet. Where is it? It's looking for the calories. And that is why, believe it or not, it turns out many people who eat artificial sweeteners actually wind up overindulging in certain foods because their body knows that there's a caloric deficit from the taste of what they consumed. And so they can actually wind up gaining weight. So artificial sweeteners, all of them are bad. I will also share that food producers are very sneaky because they have learned to try to create names that are very attractive to us. For example, Purevia and Truvia. They sound pure and they sound true like sweeteners, and they're supposedly made from stevia. They're not actually made from stevia. They are made from chemical modifications to stevia because stevia comes from a plant. So food producers cannot patent and own that plant. So they have to modify it in some way in order to then own the rights to sell you Purevia, stevia, and all the other artificial sweeteners. So I do encourage you to avoid artificial sweeteners. And I will also share that when we learn how to modify what we're eating, we can actually change our sugar set point, our palate, and we don't wind up eating as much sugar as you might think when we're being mindful about it. Okay, next. BHA and BHT are preservatives, and they are essentially abbreviations. So BHA stands for butylated hydroxyanisole. Unfortunately, these kinds of preservatives are listed as avoid or caution from the Center for Science in the Public Interest. However, the National Toxicology Program has determined that BHA could reasonably be anticipated to be a human carcinogen, meaning it causes cancer. These tend to be very common in packaged, processed things such as cereals. They sometimes can be found in crackers or other things like that. And one of the biggest challenges that I'm starting to see now is if you go into the sugar aisle and you look at that label, you look at the ingredient panel, which is below the nutrition panel, you actually have to look below that because now there's a little sentence that says BHA or BHT added to packaging for freshness. They have to announce that it's there, but they don't have to put it in the ingredient panel because it's not part of the food. But I am here to tell you if it is touching the food, it can migrate into the food, and we don't want BHA and BHT. Next. Brominated vegetable oil. This, believe it or not, was first developed as a flame retardant. So yes, if you are drinking BVO in your beverages, you are drinking flame retardant, which is not great. One of the biggest challenges with this is it is genotoxic. It can cause reproductive issues and can build up in the body and have enormous repercussions for how it impacts our nervous system, our thyroid, other things like that. And it tends to be put into beverages in order to make sure that the flavor compounds don't separate. So you find it in things like citrus flavored beverages, Mountain Dew, those kinds of things. We definitely want to avoid BVO. Next. High fructose corn syrup. We've been talking about this one for years. I'm sure many of you have heard that high fructose corn syrup is bad for you, but you possibly don't understand why. One of the reasons is because high fructose corn syrup is approximately 55% fructose by volume. The only organ in your body that is able to process fructose is your liver. If you overconsume fructose from all sources, and if you're eating a lot of fruit, chances are you're not going to overconsume. But if we start adding liquid sources of fructose, it's an issue. Then we wind up having too much. The body then has to save some for later. And it does that by putting it into what's called adipose tissue or belly fat. And then as we continue to consume, our liver is working harder and harder. There is actually a condition called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, where the liver is dangerously affected by having excessive amounts of high fructose corn syrup. And then as we continue to consume that, we then start having an impact on our microbiome, that part of our anatomy, our gut, where our beneficial bacteria live, they can't keep up with getting this high fructose impact. And then that in turn begins to affect the gut-brain axis. So over-consuming high fructose corn syrup is not a good thing. I will share that I do not believe we should ever consume high fructose corn syrup, any of it. There are certainly other syrups out there that are high in sugar, but that are not as highly processed or as high as high fructose corn syrup is. I will also share that the new darling of the sweetener world is agave nectar, and that is also not a good choice. High fructose corn syrup is approximately 55% fructose by volume. Agave nectar is approximately 70% fructose by volume. So it actually has more fructose than high fructose corn syrup. I don't recommend that one either. And the reason people claim that it's so good for you is because it has a lower glycemic index. It doesn't affect the blood sugar as quickly as high fructose corn syrup, but neither one of them represents a good choice. Next, hydrogenated oils. So hydrogenated oils are very, very interesting because for many years we have been consuming massive amounts of hydrogenated oils. This is where they take a liquid fat and they push hydrogen into it to make it solid at room temperature, things like margarine. Now, trans fats were officially banned from foods, these partially hydrogenated oils. They have shifted to fully hydrogenated oils. We don't necessarily know what the long-term impact of that is because it's a fairly recent change. But I will tell you that unfortunately, trans fats, partially hydrogenated oils can have a very negative impact on heart health. Even a tiny bit is not good for you. And so this is why eventually they've become banned. And now we have to look and see what's going to happen with the hydrogenated oils, the fully hydrogenated oils. But I'm going to recommend that when you're choosing fats, we simply want to choose the more natural fats and not the man-made fats. Next. Okay, monosodium glutamate. A lot of people think of monosodium glutamate and they automatically think Chinese food because we've heard for so many years that Chinese restaurant syndrome comes from monosodium glutamate, from using monosodium glutamate. The interesting thing is, as far as I've been able to find out, most Chinese food restaurants don't use it anymore because they know people don't like it because it can have a lot of challenges for health and well-being. So people were avoiding it. Monosodium glutamate does unfortunately still appear in a lot of things. There are a wide variety of names that it hides under. And so this is where, like, it would be a deeper dive than we have time for today, but you really want to educate yourself on this and avoid it. It has a number of different health issues, as you can read on the slide here. Also tends to be linked for many people to allergies and to migraines. So monosodium glutamate, unfortunately, is used in part because it makes things taste good and it tricks our brain into thinking it tastes good, so we want to eat more. But the downstream impact on our body is not worth it. So I would recommend avoiding this one. Next, please. Sodium benzoate. And sodium benzoate is found in a number of different foods. The biggest challenge is if it winds up being combined with vitamins C or E, it forms something called benzene. So when manufacturers are using sodium benzoate as a preservative in something, they're not adding C or E, but they're not taking into account what else you're eating with that. And so your diet makes a difference. And this is one of the biggies that we do want to avoid, in part because of cancer. Also, it can cause reproductive toxicity, meaning it can impact the ability to have healthy reproductive function. So another one to avoid. Next. Sodium nitrate, sodium nitrite. These tend to be found in processed meats, lunch meats, sausages, those kinds of things. And there have been a number of studies that have shown that they have a significant impact on digestive function. Adding these to our diet, especially over a long period of time, is problematic because it does build up in the system. And when we are consuming too much of it, especially in a cooked form, like if we're throwing sausages on the grill or other things like that, we can potentially create something called nitrosamines, which can cause cancer. And there are options out there to be able to get foods, that meats specifically, that do not have sodium nitrate, sodium nitrite. And so I do encourage you to look at the label and look for those when you are purchasing things like lunch meats, sausages, bacon, those other kinds of prepared meats. Next. Soy, corn, and canola are three of the most highly genetically modified crops on the face of the planet. And part of the reason that they are genetically modified is supposedly because it will help make it so that they can resist weeds. So farmers could theoretically plant genetically modified crops and then spray the fields with abandon, with agricultural grade Roundup. And it would not kill the corn, the soy, and the canola, but it would kill all the weeds. There are a number of problems that come from this. One is that what they are spraying the fields with contains an ingredient called glyphosate, which is a chelator. So it binds with chemicals, or sorry, it binds with minerals in the ground and prevents the plant from uptaking them. Also, because it's a chelator, it has a negative impact on our gut health. Many people who are experiencing some form of digestive distress often tend to do better when they start removing glyphosate-laden foods from their diet. It's not a sensitivity to the foods, it's actually a sensitivity to glyphosate. The other thing that's happened is we have apparently started to breed enormous colonies of insects that think glyphosate is yummy. And so all of these genetically modified crops are food to them. And we also have created super weeds, meaning we are now agriculturally working with Roundup 2 because the original doesn't work anymore because the weeds have learned how to survive in spite of it. Anytime you see anything that is soy, corn, or canola, I highly encourage you to make sure that you are getting those organic. That is the best way to avoid the Roundup glyphosate exposure. Next, please. So if anybody wants to take a quick snapshot, this is a list of everything that I just talked about. These are the top 10. And I encourage you to take the time to study those and learn more about them. Pick one that works for you and start working on removing that from your diet. Next, please. So these are 10 healthy swaps for you. And I picked these 10 because in the many years that I have been working with people and their pantries, these are the things that I often tend to find in their pantry. And so these are great things to make a quick swap. I would encourage you to take a picture of this one as well. I'm going to very briefly just go through and talk about what's a good swap for each of these things. And then I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. So for cereal, processed cereals do not represent a healthy choice for us on a lot of different levels, in part because of artificial colors and GMOs and other things. Organic rolled oats can be great. If you make homemade granola or if you do a grain-free granola, if you're someone who likes cereal, that can be a good option for you to swap. Processed cheese food. So Kraft, a lot of people probably grew up thinking Kraft cheese. Like I had Kraft cheese on my school lunch sandwiches. And I'm here to tell you it is not only not cheese, it doesn't even say cheese on the label. It says processed cheese food because it is less than 50% cheese. So they are not allowed to call it cheese. And so this is where we just want to get real cheese. If you like cheese, eat real cheese. Soda. I am a huge fan of sparkling water or kombucha as a healthy alternative here. For pancake syrup, I say go for the real thing. Please don't do the artificial stuff. Go for real 100% maple syrup. If you don't like the flavor of maple, then go for honey or possibly even jam. Canned soup. Homemade soups are a wonderful alternative. They're super easy to make. If you're someone who maybe does not have a lot of time in the kitchen, there are organic boxed soups that do not have a lot of the negative ingredients that you're going to find in the canned soup. I will also tell you, I used to live near a Campbell's factory and it smelled disgusting on cooking day. Bacon. Bacon, we love bacon. Bacon can be a great food. The biggest thing is to make sure that you are getting it from pasture-raised pork and that there are no added nitrates or nitrites. Microwave popcorn. Not a fan of this one for a number of reasons, not just the ingredients that are in it. I say go for the real thing. Make popcorn, buy organic popcorn, use a hot air popper, or do it the old-fashioned way, shaking it in a pot with either coconut oil or organic butter. It will be far more delicious and much more nourishing for your body. Margarine, definitely don't want to do that one. This is where we go for 100% organic grass-fed butter or ghee, which is clarified butter. For your condiments, I encourage you to consider looking for homemade options. Many of them are easy to make, or reading the label and looking for clean ingredient condiments. There are a number of options out there that do not have all the junk. And then table salt. The biggest challenge with table salt is that it is not really supportive for our body, and the form of iodine that they're using in iodized table salt isn't really great for us. I do encourage you to swap for Celtic salt, Himalayan salt, sea salts, and then if you're someone that needs more iodine, we look to the diet to replace that. There are a number of ways to get iodine dietarily without using poor quality lab created iodine in your salt. So thank you very much for spending this time together and listening. If anyone has any questions that still need to be answered, please let me know.